Hello, and welcome to That's What Timeshare is Made Of, an educational module brought to you by the National Timeshare Owners Association. In this module, we'll explore the structure of the timeshare product from two distinct perspectives, the legal and the logistical. Extending our rock, paper, scissors analogy from the What is Timeshare module, we see that the rock and paper sections represent the underlying ownership interest, deeded and contract-based respectively, while the scissors remind us that, regardless of what is conveyed, it needs to be divided up in such a way that owners can use it, through weeks, points, or a membership model. Before we get started, though, let's revisit the Prezi tutorial. Prezi is a nifty bit of software that allows for a more dynamic and interactive educational experience. We have it set up to give you maximum freedom in how you can learn this information. Let me explain. Down in the left-hand corner, you'll see a play button, just like you would for any video on the internet. Now, if you want, you can use that to play and pause Prezi and just let it run straight through. Or if you prefer, you can hit pause on the video playback and use the forward and back buttons either on the Prezi screen or on your own keyboard to advance slide by slide. In this way, Prezi operates just like a PowerPoint. But the coolest thing about Prezi is the overview function. At any time, when you have the video paused, you can move your cursor off to the right-hand side of the screen and three little buttons will pop up. The two on the bottom zoom you in and out, but the little house icon will take you to the overview screen. Now from there, you can click around and zoom to any point in the Prezi, picking up from where you left off or going back to review some material you've already been through. In this way, Prezi gives you total control over how you learn the material. Well, now that you know a little bit about Prezi, you're ready to take control of your learning experience. Get out there, click around, and explore. And remember, next time this tutorial pops up, you'll know how to skip it. Let's face it, outside of TV dramas or landmark Supreme Court cases, the law is rarely entertaining. That's why we've decided to use a child's playroom as our backdrop, to try and inject a little fun back into our discussion. Our first section focuses on the traditional deeded timeshare interest. In our analogy, this is the rock. Here's why. The fee simple deed is the conveyance most commonly associated with timeshare, and with good reason. This format has historically accounted for about 90% of all timeshares out there. Because it is an interest firmly rooted in property law, the deed is focused on ownership. Who owns the dirt, and who owns the bricks on top of it? When you buy a deeded timeshare, you share legal ownership of that resort with everyone else who has purchased there. We refer to the deed as a fee simple instrument. This just means that it's conveyed in perpetuity, or forever. Theoretically, it will still be in your family millions of years from now, when most of your descendants are probably some kind of human-alien hybrid. The hourglass never runs out. It just keeps getting flipped back over. As a property interest, the deed is generally subject to the same laws that govern any other real estate transaction. Disclosures, clear title, property taxes, the rule against perpetuities, which is an arcane concept that very few lawyers even get, and so forth. In some respects, this offers greater protection, but it also makes the interest much more cumbersome when it comes to transferring ownership. For example, a lengthy and expensive foreclosure proceeding may be required to deal with delinquencies. As I mentioned, Most timeshares in this country are deed-based. This has primarily been the result of pressure from lenders and lawmakers, who, despite its complexities, were simply more familiar with the tenets of property law than in contract-based instruments. While many of today's owners like the security and inheritability of their deeded timeshares, there is mounting evidence that new consumers are looking for something with less commitment. Enter the right to use, or term product. In our analogy, this is the paper. Unlike the deeded interest, the right to use, or RTU, timeshare, is based in contract law, not property. That means that it is less concerned with ownership and more focused on a set of agreed-to terms and conditions. To understand the right-to-use concept, consider this metaphor. When you check out a library book, you are entering into a contract with the library. They still own the book, but all of the adventures and romance contained within are yours to experience, at least until you return it. And that's the biggest difference between deeds and RTUs. The latter has an expiration date. It may be 9 years from now or 99, but someday the contract will end and the interest will return to the resort. For some people, this is a turnoff. For others, an unburdening. Because a contract is not weighted down by the same encumbrances that go along with a real property interest, it can be much more flexible than a deed. There may be limitations imposed by the language on transferability, rental rights, and so forth, but since the ownership never actually passes out of the resort's control, there is never a need for foreclosure, mortgage liens, or title searches. And delinquency is just a breach of contract, requiring nothing more than a termination of usage rights. It is often assumed, incorrectly, that the right to use timeshare interest is a relatively new phenomenon. However, developers have been hip to the advantages of maintaining ownership for decades. In fact, some of the very first timeshares were based on a right-to-use model. The structure is also hugely popular with international companies. The RTU is gaining favor in the United States, but it may still be some time before lenders and regulators are as comfortable with it as they are with the traditional deeded interest. That's not to say that one is superior to the other. Each has its benefits. But it is ultimately better for consumers to have a choice. So, a third option has emerged in recent years, one that seeks to bridge the gap between the deed and the right to use: the trust structure. When a timeshare is held in trust, the underlying property ownership remains with the trust, which acts as a sort of third-party fiduciary. Those who wish to purchase become the beneficiaries, and their rights are determined by contract. This provides a much more tangible connection than a right to use, while still allowing the freedom to carve out shorter-term interests. Just like a slinky is both metal and flexible, the trust is an alternative that provides the best of both the deed and RTU structures. In fact, some jurisdictions, notably Florida, consider the trust to be a real estate instrument, though transfer might not be quite as onerous as with a deed. Because of its versatility, the trust is quickly gaining ground in the timeshare world. It is an especially elegant solution for older resorts who want to offer term products but are hamstrung by their HOA documents. Ultimately, a trust may have all sorts of complex and technical stuff going on inside. But for the non-lawyers, think of it this way. Just as a toy box is a simple way to contain a mess, A trust is a simple way to retain both structural integrity and flexibility. Just throw everything in the box and shut the lid. It's neat and tidy, but you still have access to all of the toys when you need them. Our last section, the scissors of our analogy, represent the fact that regardless of whether it's legally a deed, a right to use, or a beneficial interest in a trust, all timeshares have to be divided up in order to be used. It is this slicing and dicing that makes a timeshare a timeshare. If you own a house, it has a deed. If you rent an apartment, you have a lease, which is akin to an RTU. But with those, you have access at all times. Owners of a timeshare interest, of course, share access with a number of other people. In order for this to work, all parties have to have a clear understanding of the logistics. The earliest timeshares were bought and sold in week-long increments. This design is fairly straightforward. Each unit is divided into as many as 52 interests. Often, a week or two are reserved for maintenance, with each owner checking in on the same day of the week, usually Friday or Saturday, during the same week every year. Naturally, some owners grew tired of the same thing every year, although many others love it. So the idea of floating weeks was born. This could mean that you go at the same time but stay in a different unit, or it may mean that your week is more flexible and you can be booked within a certain month, season, or possibly any time throughout the year. This worked well for many years, particularly once the ability to exchange was introduced, but it still required full week stays, or abandoning one or more days of your ownership if your schedule would not allow for a full week. The point system radically changed this paradigm, however, by providing a way for owners to place an accurate value on each vacation. Acting as a supply and demand-based alternative currency, points enable you to spend X amount for a studio in high season, or Y amount for a 2-bedroom at Christmas, or Z amount for a 1-bedroom during off-season. You spend the points as you need them, and they slide back into your account every year. But while point systems are rapidly replacing the older timeshare weeks, these are not the only two options. A slew of related usage programs are out there, though many have experienced ebbs and flows in popularity over the years. For example, various sampler or exit programs designed to give prospective buyers a taste of ownership have been around for a long time, while fractionals and private residence clubs, extremely high-end resorts with longer ownership intervals, up to several months per year, were very hot in the early 2000s, but were hit harder than most by the Great Recession. Travel clubs, which often involve shorter-term access to a large pool of discounted inventory, are en vogue right now as consumers grow more comfortable with subscription-based business models. But no matter how the meat is sliced up for sale, it can never total up to more than the animal it came from. So, if we were at lunch and I offered to trade my milk for half your sandwich, or 3 of your pretzels, or a bite of your apple, you could not then turn around and trade that same portion of food to someone else. That's why precise inventory management and oversight is so important, to make sure that no pieces get lost or added after the timeshare is cut up. Deeds and trusts, contract rights and floating weeks, point systems and travel clubs. That's what timeshare's made of. We hope you've enjoyed this educational module, and we encourage you to use Prezi to revisit any of the previous sections. On behalf of the National Timeshare Owners Association, thanks for your time, and we'll see you on vacation.